Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to Life and Death Twilight Reimagined. We are on chapter 9, if I remember correctly. Let me double check. Yes, we were. Can can I ask just one more? I started quickly as she accelerated much too fast down the quiet street. I was in no hurry to answer her question. She shook her head. We had a deal. It's not really a question, I argued, just a clarification of something you said before. She rolled her eyes. Make it quick. Well, you said you knew I hadn't gone into the bookstore and that I had gone south. I was just wondering how you knew that. She thought about it for a moment, deliberating again. I thought we were past all these evasions, I said. She gave me a kind of you asked for it look. Fine then. I followed your scent. I didn't have a response to that. I stared out the window, trying to process it. Your turn, Beau. But you didn't answer my other question. Oh, come on. I'm serious. You didn't tell me how it works. The mind reading thing. Can you read anybody's mind anywhere? How do you do it? Can the rest of your family do the same thing? It was easier to talk about this than in the dark car. The streetlights were behind us already, and in the low gleam of the dashboard, all the crazy stuff seemed a little more possible. It seemed like she felt the same sense of non-reality, like normality was on hold for as long as we were in this space together. Her voice was casual as she answered, No, it's just me, and I can't hear anyone anywhere. I have to be fairly close. The more familiar someone's voice is, the farther away I can hear him, but still no more than a few miles. She paused thoughtfully. It's a little like being in a huge hall filled with people, everyone talking at once. It's just a hum, a buzzing of voices in the background. Until I focus on one voice, and then what he's thinking is clear. Most of the time I tune it all out. It can be very distracting. And it's easier to seem normal. She frowned when she said the word, when I'm not accidentally answering someone's thoughts rather than their words. Why do you think you can't hear me? I asked curiously. She stared at me, eyes seeming to bore right through mine with that frustrated look I knew well. I realized now that each time she looked at me this way, she must have been trying to hear my thoughts, and failing. Her expression relaxed as she gave up. I don't know, she murmured. Maybe your mind doesn't work the same way the rest of theirs do. Like your thoughts are on the AM frequency and I'm only getting FM. She grinned at me, suddenly amused. My mind doesn't work right? Am I a freak? Her speculation hit home. I'd always suspected as much, and it embarrassed me to have it confirmed. I hear voices in my head, and you're worried that you're the freak, she laughed. Don't worry, it's just a theory. Her face tightened. Which brings us back to you. I frowned. How was I going to say this out loud? I thought we were past all these evasions, she reminded me softly. I looked away from her face, trying to gather my thoughts into words, and my eyes wandered across the dashboard and stopped at the speedometer. Holy crow, I shouted. What's wrong? She asked, looking right and left rather than straight ahead where she should be looking. The car didn't decelerate. You're doing 110, I was still shouting. I shot a panicked glance out the window, but it was too dark to see much. The road was only visible in the long patch of bluish brightness from the headlights. The forest along both sides of the road was like a black wall, as hard as a wall of steel if we veered off the road at this speed. Relax, Beau. She rolled her eyes, still not slowing. Are you trying to kill us? I demanded. We're not going to crash. I carefully modulated my voice. Why are we in such a hurry, Edith? I always drive like this. She turned to flash a smile at me. Keep your eyes on the road. I've never been in an accident, but things can happen. I've never even gotten a ticket. She grinned and tapped her forehead. Built-in radar detector. Hands on the wheel, Edith. She sighed, and I watched with relief as the needle gradually drifted toward 80. Happy? Almost. I hate driving slow, she muttered. This is slow? Enough commentary on my driving, she snapped. I also do this. I'm still waiting for you to answer my question. What was the question? I forgot. I forced my eyes away from the road in front of us, but I didn't know where to look. It was hard to look at her face, knowing the word I was going to have to say now. Oh yeah, I remember now. My anxiety must have been pretty obvious. I promise I won't laugh this time, she said gently. I'm not worried about that. Then what? That you'll be upset, unhappy. She lifted her hand off the gear shift and held it out toward me just a few centimeters. An offer. I glanced up quickly to make sure I understood, and her eyes were soft. Don't worry about me, she said. I can handle it. I took her hand, and she curled her fingers very lightly around mine for one short second, then dropped her hand back to the gear shift. Carefully, I placed my hand over the top of hers again. I ran my thumb along the outside of her hand, tracing from her wrist to the tip of her pinky finger. Her skin was so soft, not that it had any give at all, no, but soft like sateen? Satin? Saturn. Smoother even. The suspense is killing me, Bo, she whispered. I'm sorry, I don't know where to start. Another long moment of silence, just the purr of the engine, the sound of my hitching breath. I couldn't hear hers at all. I traced back down the side of her perfect hand. Why don't you start at the beginning, she suggested, her voice more normal now, practical. Is this something you thought up on your own, or did something make you think of it? A comic book, maybe, or a movie? Nothing like that, I said, but I didn't think of it on my own. She waited. It was Saturday, down at the beach. I risked a glance up at her face. She looked confused. I ran into an old family friend, Julie Black. Her mom, Bonnie, and Charlie have been close since before I was born. She still looked confused. Bonnie's one of the leaders. Her confused expression froze in place. It was like all the planes of her face had suddenly hardened into ice. Oddly, she was even more beautiful like that. A goddess again in the light of the dashboard dials. She didn't look very human, though. She stayed frozen, so I felt compelled to explain the rest. There was this cute woman on the beach, Sam something. Logan made a comment about you trying to make fun of me, and this Sam said your family didn't come to the reservation, only it sounded like she meant something more than that. Jewel seemed like she knew what the woman was talking about, so I got her alone, kept bugging her until she told me about the Quiute legends. I was surprised when she spoke. Her face was so still, her lips barely moved. And what were those legends? What did Jules Black tell you I was? I half opened my mouth, then closed it again. What? I don't want to say it. It's not my favorite word either. Her face warmed up a little. She looked human again. Not saying it doesn't make it go away, though, like Voldemort. Sometimes I think not saying it makes it more powerful. See? Admittedly, I've already read this, so I knew that was coming. But never mind. I wondered if she was right. Vampire, I whispered. She flinched. Nope, saying it out loud didn't make it any less powerful. Funny how it didn't sound stupid anymore, like it had in my room. It didn't feel like we were talking about impossible things, about old legends or silly horror movies or paperback books. This is not. It felt real and very powerful. We drove in silence for another minute, and the word vampire seemed to get bigger and bigger inside the car. It didn't feel like it belonged to her, really, but more like it had the power to hurt her. I tried to think of something, anything, to say to erase the sound of it. Before I could come up with anything, she spoke. What did you do then? Oh, I did some research on the internet, because that is always a good idea. And that convinced you? She was very matter-of-fact now. No, nothing fit. Lots of it was really stupid, but I stopped abruptly. She waited, then stared at me when I didn't finish. You what? She pushed. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter, right? So I just let it go, like the song. Her eyes grew wider and wider, and then suddenly they narrowed. They were narrowed into little slits glaring at me. I also do this to people. I didn't want to point out to her again that she should probably be watching where she was going, but her speed had crept up past 95 now, and she seemed totally unaware of the twisting road ahead of us. Edith? It doesn't matter, she half shouted at me, her voice going shrill and almost metallic. Metallica? It doesn't matter? No, not to me anyway. You don't care if I'm a monster, if I'm not human? No. Finally she stared at the road again, her eyes still long slashes of anger across her face. I could feel the car accelerating underneath me. You're upset. See, I shouldn't have said anything, I mumbled. She shook her head, then answered through her teeth. No, I'd rather know what you're thinking, even if what you're thinking is insane. Sorry. She blew out an exasperated sigh, and then it was quiet again for a few minutes. I shook my thumb slowly and up and down her hand. What are you thinking about now? She asked. Her voice was calmer. Oh, nothing, really. It drives me crazy not knowing. I don't want to, I don't know, offend you? Spit it out, Bo. I have lots of questions, but you don't have to answer them. I'm just curious. About what? How old are you? 17? I stared at her for a minute, till half her mouth twitched up into a smile. How long have you been 17? I asked. A while, she admitted. I smiled. Okay. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. This was better, though. Easier with her just being herself and not worrying about keeping me in the dark. I like being on the inside. What? Her world was where I wanted to be. Don't laugh, but how do you come outside in the daytime? She laughed away. Myth. Actually, it isn't. That's from movies. I believe it started with Nosferatu. The sound of her laughter was warm and made me feel like I had swallowed a bunch of sunlight. My smile got bigger. Burned by the sun? Myth. Sleeping in coffins? Myth. She hesitated for a moment and then added softly, I can't sleep. It took me a minute to absorb that. At all? Never, she murmured. She turned to look at me with a wistful expression. I held her gaze, my eyes getting trapped in her golden stare. After a few seconds, I'd completely lost my train of thought. Suddenly, she turned away, her eyes narrowing again. You haven't asked me the most important question yet. The most important question? I echoed. I couldn't think of what she meant. Aren't you curious about my diet? She asked, her tone mocking. Oh, that one. Yes, that one, she said bleakly. Do you want to know if I drink blood? I winced. Well, Jules said something about that. Did she now? She said you didn't hunt people. Your family wasn't supposed to be dangerous because you only hunted animals. Although they're destroying the ecosystem, so you know there's that. I was going to say typical white people, but I don't want people to call me racist on the internet because it hurts. She said we weren't dangerous. Her voice was deeply skeptical. Not exactly. She said you weren't supposed to be dangerous, but the Quiute still didn't want you on their land, just in case. She looked forward, but I could tell if she was watching. I couldn't tell if she was watching the road or not, sorry. So, was she right about not hunting people? I tried to keep my voice as even as possible. The Quiutes have a long memory, she whispered. I took that as a confirmation. I went to confirmation one time. I mean, it is supposed to be one time, but never mind. Don't let that make you complacent, though, she warned me. They're right to keep their distance from us. We're still dangerous. I don't understand. We try, she explained. Her voice got heavier and slower. We're usually very good at what we do. Sometimes we make mistakes. Me, for example, allowing myself to be alone with you. This is a mistake? I heard the hurt in my voice, but I didn't know she could, too. A very dangerous one, she murmured. We were both silent then. I watched the headlights twist with the curves of the road. They moved too fast. It didn't look real. It looked like a video game. I was aware of time slipping away so quickly, like the black road underneath us, and I was suddenly terrified that I would never have another chance to be with her like this again. Openly, the walls between us gone for once. What was she saying? What she was saying kind of sounded like goodbye. My hand tightened over hers. I couldn't waste 1 minute I had with her. Tell me more. I didn't really care what she said. I just wanted to listen to her voice. She looked at me quickly, seeming startled by the change in my tone. What more do you want to know? Tell me why you hunt animals instead of people, I said. It was the first question I could think of. My voice sounded thick. I double-blinked, the extra moisture from my eyes. Her answer was very low. I don't want to be a monster. But animals aren't enough? She paused. I can't be sure, but I'd compare it to living on tofu and soy milk. We call ourselves vegetarians, our little inside joke. I feel like vegan would have been a better word. Yeah, that actually makes more sense. It doesn't completely satiate the hunger. Really? I slip on completely. The hunger, or rather thirst, but it keeps us strong enough to resist most of the time. Sometimes it's more difficult than others. Is it very difficult for you now? I asked. She sighed, yes. But you're not hungry now, I said, stating, not asking. Why do you think that? Your eyes. I have a theory about that. It seems like the color is linked to your mood, and people are generally crabbier when they're hungry, right? She laughed. You're more observant than I gave you credit for. I listened to the sound of her laugh, committing it to memory. So creepy. So everything I thought I saw that day with the van, that all happened for real. You caught the van. She shrugged. Yes. How strong are you? She glanced at me from the side of her eye. Strong enough. Like, could you lift 5,000 pounds? She looked a little thrown by my enthusiasm. If I needed to, but I'm not much into feats of strength. They just make Eleanor competitive, and I'll never be that strong. How strong? Honestly, if she wanted to, I think she could lift a mountain over her head. But I would never say that around her, because then she would have to try. She laughed, and it was a relaxed sound, affectionate. Were you hunting this weekend with Eleanor? I asked when it was quiet again. Yes, she paused for a second, as if deciding whether or not to say something. I didn't want to leave, but it was necessary. It was a bit easier to be around you when I'm not thirsty. Why didn't you want to leave? It makes me anxious to be away from you. Her eyes were gentle, but intense, and it made it hard to breathe in and out like normal. I wasn't joking when I asked you to try not to fall in the ocean or get run over last Thursday. I was distracted all weekend worrying about you, and after what happened tonight, I'm surprised that you did make it through a whole weekend unscathed. She shook her head and then seemed to remember something. Well, not totally unscathed. What? Your hands, she reminded me. I looked down at my palms, at the almost healed scrapes across the heels of my hands. She didn't miss anything. I fell. That's what I thought. Her lips curved up at the corners. I suppose being you, it could have been much worse, and that was the possibility that tormented me the entire time I was away. It was a very long 3 days. I really got on Eleanor's nerves. 3 days? Didn't you just get back today? No, we got back Sunday. Then why weren't you at school? I was frustrated, almost angry, as I thought of how much her absence had affected me. Absinthe, I think, is a alcoholic beverage. Well, you asked if the sun hurt me, and it doesn't, but I can't go out in the sunlight. At least not where anyone can see. Why? I'll show you sometime, she promised. I thought about it for a moment. You could have told me. She was puzzled, but I knew you were fine. But I didn't know you were fine. I hesitated, dropping my eyes. What? Her silky voice was as hypnotic as her eyes. It's going to sound stupid, but, well, it kind of freaked me out. I thought you might not come back. That somehow you knew I knew, and I was afraid you would disappear. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had to see you again. My cheeks started heating up. She was quiet. I glanced up. She looked pained, like something was hurting her. Edith, are you okay? Uh, she groaned quietly. This is wrong. I couldn't understand her response. What did I say? Don't you see, Bo? It's one thing for me to make myself miserable, but a wholly other thing for you to be so involved. She turned her anguished eyes to the road, her words flowing almost too fast for me to understand. I don't want to hear that you feel that way. It's wrong. It's not safe. I'll hurt you, Bo. You'll be lucky to get out alive. I don't care. That's a really stupid thing to say. Maybe, but it's true. I told you, it doesn't matter to me what you are. It's too late. Her voice whipped out low and sharp. Never say that. It's not too late. I can put things back the way they were. I will. I stared straight ahead, glad again for the scarf. My neck was a mass of crimson splotches, I was sure. I don't want things back the way they were, I mumbled. I wondered if I was supposed to move my hand. I held it still. Maybe she would forget it was there. I'm sorry I've done this to you. Her voice burned with real regret. The darkness slipped by us in silence. I realized the car was slowing, and even in the dark I recognized landmarks. We were passing into the boundaries of Forks. It had taken less than 20 minutes. I don't know if that's physically possible. Will I see you tomorrow? Do you want to? She whispered. More than anything else I've ever wanted. It was pathetic how obviously true the words were. So much for playing hard to get. She closed her eyes. The car didn't deviate so much as half an inch from the center of the lane. Sorry. Then I'll be there, she said fondly. I do have a paper to turn in. She looked at me then, and her face was calmer, but her eyes were troubled. We were suddenly in front of Charlie's house. The lights were on, my truck in its place, everything totally normal. It was like waking up from a dream. The kind you didn't want to lose, the kind you kept your eyes closed tight for, rolled over, covered your head with a pillow, trying to find a way back in. She shut off the engine, and I didn't move. Save me a seat at lunch, I asked, hesitantly. I was rewarded with a wide smile. That's easy enough. You promise? I couldn't help to keep the tone light enough. I promise. I stared into her eyes, and it was like she was a magnet again, like she was pulling me toward her, and I had no power to resist. I didn't want to try. The word vampire was still there between us, but it was easier to ignore than I would have thought possible. Her face was so unbearably perfect, it hurt in a strange way to look at it. At the same time, I never wanted to look away. I wanted to know if her lips were as silky smooth as... What? Seriously, he's getting creepy. As the skin of her hand. What? I'm confused. Suddenly, her left hand was there, palm forward, an inch from my face, warning me back. And she was cringing against the door, her eyes wide and frightened, and her teeth clenched together. I jerked away from her. Sorry. Seriously. She stared at me for a long moment, and I would swear she wasn't breathing. After a long moment, she relaxed a little. You have to be more careful than that, Bo, she said finally in a dull voice. Cautiously, like I was made of glass or something. Her left hand lifted mine off of her right and let it go. I crossed my arms over my chest. Maybe, she began. I can do better than that, I interrupted quickly. Just tell me the rules, and I'll follow them. Whatever you want from me, she sighed. Seriously, tell me to do something, and I'll do it. I regretted the words the second they were out of my mouth. What if she asked me to forget about her? There were some things that warranted my power to do so. But she smiled. All right, I've got one. Yeah? I asked wary. Don't go into the woods alone again. I could feel the surprise in my voice. How did you know that? She touched the tip of her nose. Really? You must have an incredible sense. Are you going to agree to what I ask or not? She interrupted. Sure, that one's easy. Can I ask why? She frowned, her eyes tight again as she stared out the window past me. I'm not always the most dangerous thing out there. Let's leave it at that. The sudden bleakness in her voice made me shiver, but I was relieved too. She could have asked for something much harder. Whatever you say, I sighed. I'll see you tomorrow, Beau. I knew she wanted me to leave now. I opened the door unwillingly. Tomorrow, I emphasized. I started to climb out. Beau? I turned and dug back awkwardly, and she was leaning toward me, her pale goddess face just inches from mine. My heart stopped beating. Sleep well, she said. Her breath blew into my face. It was the same compelling scent that haunted her car, but in a more concentrated form. I blinked, totally stunned. She leaned away. Dragon breath. It's a move in Pokemon. It causes paralysis. Never mind. It took me a few seconds till my brain unscrambled and I was able to move again. I backed out of the car, having to use the frame for balance. I thought she might have laughed, but the sound was too quiet for me to be sure. She waited till I stumbled to the front door, and then her engine quietly revved. I turned to watch the silver car disappear around the corner. It was suddenly really cold. I reached for the key automatically and unlocked the door. Beau, my dad called from the living room. Yeah, Dad, it's me. I locked the door and then went to find him. He was on his favorite couch, a baseball game on the TV. Movie over so early? Is it early? It seemed like I'd been with her for days, or maybe it was just a few seconds. Not long enough. It's not even 8 yet, he told me. Was the show any good? Not very memorable, actually. What is that around your neck? I grabbed the scarf I'd forgotten and tried to yank it off, but it was wrapped too many times around my neck, and I just choked myself. I also do this. Oh, I forgot a coat, and someone lent me a scarf. It looks goofy. Yeah, I figured, but it's warm. Are you okay? You look kind of pale. Aren't I always kind of pale? I guess so. Actually, my head was starting to spin a little, and I was still cold, though I knew the room was warm. Wouldn't it be just like me if I did end up going into shock? Get a grip. I didn't sleep great last night, I said to Charlie. Think I'm gonna hit the sack early. Night, kid. I don't know why I started getting gruff. I walked up the stairs slowly, a sort of stupor starting to cloud my mind. I had no reason to be exhausted or so cold. I brushed my teeth and splashed some hot water on my face. It made me shiver. I didn't bother changing. I just kicked off my shoes, then climbed into the bed, fully dressed. The second time in a week. I wrapped my quilt tightly around me and fought through a couple of small shudders. My mind swirled like I was dizzy. It was full of impressions and images. Some I wished could see more clearly, some I didn't want to remember at all. The road whipping by too fast, the dim yellow light of the restaurant glinting in her metallic hair, the shape of her lips when she smiled, when she frowned, Jeremy's eyes bugging half out of his head, the headlights screaming toward me, the gun pointed at my face while cold sweat beaded on my forehead. My bed shook under me as I shivered again. No, there were too many things I wanted to remember, and I wanted to cement into my head. To waste time with the unpleasant stuff, I pulled the scarf I was still wearing up over my nose and inhaled her scent. Unless, of course, it's Archie's. You know, since it's his scarf. Almost immediately, my body relaxed, the tremor stilling. I pictured her face in my head, every angle, every expression, every mood. There were a few things I knew for sure. For one, Edith was an actual vampire. For another, there was a part of her that saw me as food, but in the end, none of that mattered. All that mattered was that I loved her, more than I'd ever imagined it was possible to love anything. She was everything I wanted, the only thing I could ever want. That sounds like me and Batman. Not like being in love with Batman, but, you know, just the idea of Batman. Never mind. Okay, and that was Chapter 9. Let me know if I'm doing better. It was only 14 pages. That's why this video is relatively short, considering the last one was like 40-something. Let me know if you'd like to see me do more skits. If any of you are actually watching those or anything. I'm having a lot of fun with them. And I actually wanted to have this channel be skits and not a gaming channel, so there's that. Iggy's in the bath. I'm about to clean out his tank. I said tank, but it's really more of a cage. I should feed the turtles. I woke up late today. That's why the video is going to be up so late, because I usually wake up at a certain point when the light from outside gets bright enough. But I forgot that it's raining today, so it was really cloudy, and it looked like it was still 8 o'clock, even though it was like 9:30. Anyway, that's not important. So sorry about that, but until next time, goodbye everybody.